Hello, I'm David Sparks and joined today by my friend and yours, Mr. Stephen Hackett. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, David, how are you?
Good. I do need to get used to the new way we do the intro with the new music and artwork, but I'm digging all the feedback we got on it.
Yeah, people seem pumped. Lots of kind words about both. The music is just it's so good.
Yeah.
It was in my downloads folder the other day. I was cleaning that out. I listened to it a
Yeah.
couple times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we didn't really go into it, but should we go down the rabbit hole and explain which devices are the music? I think the MPU audience would probably want to know that.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so the startup chime is the Quadra. The Quadra Bong, right?
Yeah.
Bong. Yeah.
What a computer.
Although I haven't got confirmation. Jim Etzendorf made it better. I feel like he added some layers to that chord. I feel like there's more in our chord than there is in the original one.
Definitely.
Do you have a Quadra in your collection? I would think so.
I
Right?
do, I'm sure. Look, I have a
Yeah.
spreadsheet. I can
Nice.
just consult now instead of just wondering.
It's funny for the audience because we had this chat in Slack where like let's update the sound too, and at one point I said, well, maybe we should do it based on classic Mac sounds, and like 2 seconds later, Stephen emailed us or gave us a link to like all the sounds from all the Macs.
Yep.
Like, of course, you had all that stuff just sitting by waiting.
Yes.
I love it.
And I do,
Yeah.
turns out, have a Quadra 950 floating around.
All right.
So
All right.
yeah, the intro music is the Quadra, then with a bunch of like Jim Metzendorf magic on top of it.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah. Ad bumpers is the 6100.
Yeah. Early beige Mac, early Power Mac. I think it's nice to have first generation Power PC represented in the show.
I'd love to say that we did that based on the our favorite Macs. Like, oh, I really love the Quadra. Let's use that for the opening. But the truth is, at least from my point of view, is we picked the ones that sounded the coolest.
I think so too. There's a lot
Yeah.
of sounds to choose from, and not all of them are good.
Yeah.
It's really actually kind of surprising how kind of harsh some of them are, if you will.
I mean, you go back to the old days, computers didn't have that much ability to make sound. So you didn't really have a whole lot of options. And then on top of that, at the end, it's a 2LC. So there you go. I guess we could have made that a contest too. Like if somebody figured them all out, that would have been fun. You know what we could have done if somebody figured them all out, but it's too late because I gave it away, is we could have sent them a Mac Power Users hat because you can get that now.
You can get that now. We have a new hat and some new shirts. They're in the subtle style, so they're embroidered. They look really awesome. I put my order in the second it was available. We mentioned this last week on the show, but you do only have a couple of weeks to get this stuff. It's a limited run. You have through the afternoon of April 14th. And then orders will ship a couple of weeks later. So around the 1st of May, stuff should be showing up. But the hat looks awesome. And there's several different colors of the hat
Styles.
if you don't want black. I actually don't recommend a black hat. You don't want you to get too hot. I did mine in gray. I like the gray.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. The dark gray with the orange logo. And they're the dad hats, so they're like fit you nice.
Yes.
I'm so in. Yeah. And then we got the shirts, but we also got the sweatshirts. I love those sweatshirts that they make over there at Cotton Bureau. I think they're awesome, and I will be ordering several.
Yes. And again, multiple colors. Super psyched about how this stuff is looking, and look forward to seeing it out in the world.
Yeah, but do note there is very limited time on this, and the way that they work at Cotton Bureau is we can't like reopen this. So you need to get in there. This is the week. If you're going to get in there, get in there. We got links in the show notes. Order your merch. It won't be around long.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the music just for a second, because there was a note, I think, in the forum somewhere, and then I opened the Notion and saw a note in here as well that, obviously the history of the music of the show has changed, but there were a few episodes where you played saxophone.
Yes.
I have
that was my shame.
I have no memory of this. I've listened to the show forever, like years and years before I was on it, years before it was on Relay. But I read this like, no way. And so Tell me about it.
Yeah, so I didn't really go into it that much. So originally we had the GarageBand loop that we used forever up until a few weeks ago. But for a little while, we had some music that our friend Johnny Niddle wrote for us. Johnny's a commercial music composer. He does it for a lot of TV shows and stuff, and he wrote some music. He's a fan of the show. But and I love Johnny, but for whatever reason, the audience wasn't super into it. Um, so we were going to go back, and then I forget somebody talked to me, and they're like, "Why don't you play your sax for some title music?" So then I talked to my buddy JF, who's also a professional musician. He put together a little like loop, and I played like a very short like melody on top of it, and we played that for like 2 weeks, and people are like, "Wow, that really sounds like Kenny G." They were making fun of me, and I'm like, "That is it. It's out," because nobody compares me to Kenny G. And in case you didn't know, I'm not a huge Kenny G fan. Good guy, I'm sure, but just not my thing. So we nuked that and went back to GarageBand, and I just ignored it for forever. I don't know what episodes those were, and we have 737 of them or whatever. So if anybody can find that episode and wants to let me know, go for it. But I don't have it in me to go listen to the beginning of all those episodes. But somewhere in the middle is a couple that start with a saxophone song, and I got some really unhappy email when we did that, so it didn't last very long.
There you go.
Kind of a funny little story.
That's incredible.
Yeah. It was a very short run thing. Now, unlike the new music, it's here for the duration. And the thing I didn't say on the show last week, but I really feel is like when Katie left, I felt like there was one person I could do the show with, and it was you. And I really feel like this kind of like legacy Mac sounds and the color orange, which we both love. I just feel like this needed to happen since you've joined the show, and I'm just really glad that we did it. So good for us.
Yeah, it's always fun to take an existing property and update it. I think I mentioned that we're doing the same thing at Relay. Relay is going to turn 10 years old this year, which is, I cannot understand how that's possible. But even then, like, there's always history and like feelings attached to something, but then you work hard and make something new, and there's excitement around that as well. So a lot of fun. Change is fun and good.
I just realized looking at the picture of the hat here at Cotton Bureau, I need to take our logo and turn it into a sticker on my iPhone so I can sticker it.
It's very stickerable.
Yeah, that's a word now. Stickerable.
Sure. Today on More Power Users, which is our ad-free, longer version of the show. We do it each and every week. You also get access to the Relay members Discord, some members-only podcasts from Relay, a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to be talking about WWDC. So in the last week or so, the 2024 conference has been announced. I'm sure we will talk more about it as we wind our way closer to summer. But at this point, we kind of want to put a flag in the ground, our 30,000-foot view of our expectations, what we think Apple may be up to this summer, and then maybe talk a little bit about our plans for this year. My like content brain, right, at work, like the year starts at WWDC, and then like it goes to the iPhone, then it kind of tapers down, and then WWDC comes back around and it starts again. And so this is sort of the beginning of the nerdy Apple year for a lot of us. And I think I really think this year is going to be a memorable one.
Yeah, we have lots of thoughts, and we're going to be talking about more power users. If you want to get more power users, and we sure would appreciate it, gang, because there's no mystery that the ad industry is not super into podcasting at this point for some reason. But either way, you can go to relay.fm/MPU. If you sign up, you get ad-free every week, an extended version of the show. And we have a lot of fun making it, and we hope you enjoy it. All right. We talked about Freeform already on the show back in episode 673.
Mm-hmm.
And that was right after it launched. Been a while. Apple has made updates. I think both of if I had to summarize that episode, I'd say we were both enthusiastic about it, but there were a lot of rough edges, and Apple's had time to work on those rough edges since then. I we're going to talk later about it, but I use Freeform all the time. It's become part of my tech stack. I think you use it less, but you do have some use for it. Well,
I
I'm
do.
looking forward to hearing what you do with it. But I thought it was time to go back and kind of like update that episode, because I think if you listen to the episode, you'd probably be like, "Oh, I'm going to wait a while," and I don't think you necessarily need to wait any longer if you're interested in what Freeform has to offer. So here we are to revisit Freeform.
Yeah, one of the big questions we had in that episode, 'cause I went back and skimmed through it in preparation for this, was is Apple going to treat this like an iWork app? Like, actually, today as we were recording, Tuesday, April 2nd, there's new versions of Pages, Keynote, and Numbers like in the App Store right now. I just saw the headline
Yeah,
before we sat down to record. Freeform isn't like that. I thought maybe it would be, but it seems to be more like Mail or Safari, where it's getting updates with major OS releases. So version 2 was released with iOS and iPadOS 17 and macOS Sonoma, now 9 months ago or so. And a lot of bug fixes, a lot of work went into the stability of that release. One of the things we talked about in episode 673 was sometimes the app just wasn't stable. Like, it's been a lot.
yeah.
I don't have a lot of apps crash on my Mac, but sometimes Freeform would, or it would act in unexpected ways. And they really addressed a lot of those things in the 2.0 release. And they also included some new tools, including a ruler, some additional brushes, as well as a shape recognition feature. So this is not one of those things where they shipped it and forgot about it. This really, I mean, we keep coming back to this over the last couple of years. I think Freeform is yet another example of Apple paying close attention to their productivity apps and moving them forward. Yeah, it's not as often as iWork, and again, maybe it should be, but I was very pleased that it got attention in the second year it was out. And I suspect that, every year there will be something. It may not be anything amazing, but I think they're going to keep working on it. And most notably, and we're going to talk about it specifically later on, it shipped with visionOS 1.0 as a native app. And like Calendar is an iPad app still to this, a couple of months after launch, it's an iPad app. But Freeform was there as a native app with SharePlay and the whole thing. Like I said, we'll talk about that. But I think Apple is focused on this app. I think they see it as an important part of their ecosystem. It's on all of their platforms. And I've been very pleased by that. I was, sometimes you get nervous when there's a new app or service from Apple that it may sit for a little while, but that seems to not be the case.
Well, they had a run there for a while where they were making apps that like felt like abandonware the day after they shipped, like remember that song recording app? And they had a bunch of them for a little while there where it was like it seemed like it was a hobby thing that somebody had picked up on, but then they didn't like finish it and they didn't really go anywhere with it. And Freeform is not that. I mean, it's definitely here. I mean, I guess that's one of the questions is, do you think Freeform exists because of the Vision OS and the Vision Pro, that they're like, oh, we're going to release this thing in a couple of years. We need an app like this for that headset.
Yeah. Actually, I do think
Yeah.
that. Maybe it wasn't as clear as that internally, but I do think that Freeform is really good on Vision OS, and that a device like that just cries out for a whiteboard app. And so I don't know if it was like the first version of it or whatever, but I think it may be one of the most interesting versions of it. And I think it's really key to kind of what the Vision Pro could end up being for people down the line.
Yeah. I originally I thought like this app would not exist without Vision Pro. I'm using it now because I do use it in Vision Pro. We're going to cover that later in the show, but I use it a lot without Vision Pro, which has got me thinking, well, maybe that's me being too manipulative, that maybe they actually did want this in general. Like they had meetings, they're a company, they collaborate. I could see this kind of be a scratch your own itch kind of thing. But I definitely think the existence of the Vision Pro makes the continued development of this even more important.
I think so too. I think it's a key thing if this is the way that you work, collaboratively, or just having a big whiteboard hanging in space.
Yeah.
But it is also
Uh,
good on the other platforms too, right? It's not like
yeah,
it's excellent on Vision and kind of cruddy on the others. I feel like it's a pretty good citizen everywhere.
yeah. And so let's just talk for a minute. I'm sure there's a couple people in the audience that have never opened Freeform and don't know what the heck we're talking about. So, on the basic level, this is a whiteboard app, and there have been whiteboard apps for a long time. This is an app where you can put graphics and links and objects, and it's got built in graphics. So you can kind of construct diagrams on it as much as you want. It is almost an infinite canvas app. So the way it works is it gives you a set amount of space when you open it up, but as you creep towards the edges, it gets bigger. But there is a limit. Like you can actually get to a point where it's not infinite, but it's still really big.
It's pretty big. Yeah. I
Yeah.
have never run out of space on a freeform board.
Yeah. And just for an example, like when I was a lawyer, I used to solve problems with a big piece of, they 3M, how they make sticky notes?
Yeah.
They make sticky notes that are like 3 foot by 4 foot. They're like poster size, and I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but they're huge. And like it's supposed to be when you have like a brainstorming meeting with your team, and you get a big felt marker and you write, okay, what are we going to do to make things better? Popcorn in the kitchen. Okay, write that down. And like so, you've got this big thing on the wall you write on. But what I would do is, I was working on a problem, I would get a piece of that and put it on my desk, and I would write on it in pencil. So I would have a 3 foot by 5 foot page of paper, but I would write in my normal handwriting on it. And I would just start developing a case or a theory with that. And I've always loved that. And I do the same thing for Max Sparky. When I made the decision to quit being a lawyer, I did it with a big sheet of paper. And then, so Freeform for me is a digital version of that, which I can carry around with me. I have not been using the 3M stuff since Freeform came out because it's so good for that. So I guess I gave away one of the things I do with it. But it gives you that ability to kind of expand, write down a thought and expand upon it. And that is probably the best kind of explanation of it if you haven't used it. But it goes much further because Apple has brought all their magic into it. Like they've got a great dot grid system in there. If you've got an iPad, it's probably the best use of the Apple Pencil, in my opinion, where you can write on it. Um, you can import graphics, you can import links, got built-in graphic systems, and the sharing, which we made fun of, honestly, back in December 2022 when we did that show on it, is much better now. I mean, Stephen and I have been sharing 2 or 3 boards over the last few weeks. And we've got a big one that we're working on for this show outline. And I've been working on it as we've been recording today. I see Stephen jumping around inside of it, and things are sticking where they should. Overall, I think they've solved a lot of the sync problems since it first launched.
We had this sort of hilarious bug where handwritten text would slowly move around and then like crash into other objects, and that's just totally fixed. I was looking through um, those old show notes, and I had 3 feedbacks that I'd sent to Apple, and
Yeah.
all 3 of them seem to be resolved, which is good. Again, to the credit of the team working on this. Um, and the sharing is good. Like I can see kind of what section you're in. There's like your little picture, and then
Yeah.
sort of a box gets drawn around like the area you're working in. And it's easier in like Notion or Google Docs or something, even iWork, when you're working in a document to see where someone is, right? Normally their avatar or their initials just kind of get put next to the line that they're in and you see a cursor. Well, in a document that has photos and media and handwritten notes and text, like how do you show where someone's working? And I think they really kind of nailed it. It's like it highlights the area you're in. If you change something, I can see it. It's really fast. And I think from the ground up was built with that collaboration in mind. Unlike something like iWork, I'm not saying they've done a bad job at it. I think they've done actually a pretty good job at adding collaboration to like notes and iWork and stuff. But I think with Freeform, it was clearly kind of part of the idea from the beginning.
Yeah. And it's just rock solid. And like that drift we were talking about before was particularly difficult because the way I write, I print. So there are different strokes. So like the letter N will have 3 strokes in it. But if like the middle stroke starts moving
Yeah.
one direction and the right stroke goes a different direction, suddenly my writing turns into like hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
And it was rough.
It was.
But yeah, but that's just not here. I mean, it's just not even an issue. Like you, I went back and looked at my notes from the last one, and I'm like, none of these problems are here anymore. I mean,
Mhm.
we do have a couple bits of feedback and a couple bugs that we came across, but it's just very minimal compared to the way it was before. If you work with a team, this is absolutely something that you can implement. I don't think there's any problem with it. All right. Some tips. We went over the new version, but there's more to it. And having used it quite a bit, there's a couple things that have kind of come to me. One thing you can do now we couldn't do before is you can break shapes apart. So there's a bunch of built-in shapes, but like one of them is a map. And I was doing a thing where I wanted to isolate California. You can go into the map of the United States and pick specific elements of it, and there's a command. You tap on the shape. There's a little ellipses. You tap on that and just say break apart, and it breaks the map into its component pieces. But it'll do this with any shape, a star, and a rectangle, whatever you put up there. You can break it into pieces, and so that gives you a whole bunch of extra built-in shapes that you don't realize you have. So I use that all the time, and I don't think it's clear that feature even exists. So that's one tip. You want me to keep going?
Yeah. Let's rattle through these.
Okay, I've got another one. There's no template system in it. And like they do have this in some of the iWork apps, and I really like templates, especially for this kind of work where like you're building these idea boards and things to work on ideas with. Why not have kind of a built-in template for it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that this is really a tip, honestly, but I make the ideal version of it, and then I save it as with template in the name, and then I just duplicate it anytime I need to make it. And so I can make multiple types of templates. And this is a hack. This is not a tip. This one will be categorized as a hack. Another one is I don't think people realize that you can use it as a presentation device. I did a talk about 6 months ago where I made the whole thing in a big Freeform document. And so what the trick there is you share the screen on your Mac, because this is the advantage now is that the synchronization is near instantaneous. So any changes you make show up immediately. So what I do is I put it on the Mac, and then I have the iPad attached with the same board open on both of them. And I could annotate it while I was doing the talk, and it would show up on the screen, and it would look like I was writing on my Mac screen. And like after the presentation, I was talking about something completely different, but the most common question was, how did you do that? And
Nice.
that's like, it's not that hard. You just open up a board in Freeform and you can write on it with your iPad and it shows up. In fact, that led to one of my visionOS workflows, which we'll talk about later. The other thing about it is they're really good at color changes, and there's a bunch of different colors. So don't be afraid to use different colors with it. I think that's something that I've kind of come to embrace a bit more. And also there's a bunch of different mediums now. Like you mentioned earlier that they've added a couple new ones, but I love the pencil. That's actually probably my favorite. Right, but they've got fountain pen, they've got calligraphy, they've got all this stuff. The calligraphy pen looks really good if you have good handwriting. I would recommend trying that. I'm going to keep going. If you want to export, you can export to PDF, and that's a really good way to share it.
Definitely.
I tried throwing the PDF at ChatGPT, and it was struggling with my handwriting. But I feel like there's an AI angle to this. I just haven't quite got it sorted out yet. And links work really well. So you can make a link to a Freeform board under the sharing menu. In fact, we have, for this document, I put a link in the Notion. So when you're looking at our Notion outline, you can click on it and go to the Freeform board. So I don't know. I just feel like these are just options that just really didn't work that well the first time. With version 1. I feel like version 1 was a little rough of this app.
I think it was for sure.
Yeah, but they did a good job with this, and I feel like they've picked it up. And so often an app gets branded by its first release.
Yeah.
And I am here to be a cheering section for
Yeah.
Freeform. No, go check it out if you tried it and you didn't like it the first time.
One tip that I'll throw in here as well is the use of sticky notes. So you can have a sticky note anywhere on the board. And
Yeah,
I've used it for things that like on the board that maybe aren't done. Like if I'm working on something, I need to come back to it. I'll do like a yellow sticky note, and it kind of goes back to the physicality that you were talking about with your old 3M sheets.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
okay, if this is a thing I'm working on, I would put a sticky note on it of like, hey, finish this part of it. And I can go back through. And then when I'm done, I'm done when I've cleared all the stickies. And that's something that I've come to really like about it.
I never use those in Freeform. It's interesting because as much as I liked my gigantic 3M sticky notes, I'm generally not a fan of sticky notes, so I don't like seeing them. But to each his own.
That's right.
But the graphics, you can like graphics, all that stuff you can drop on this thing, and everything stays where you put it. You can collaborate on it, and I do get the idea of the sticky notes. I guess I need to like rethink this. Maybe I need to start using some digital stickies.
It's it's cool. Look, the Stickies app lives on in Mac OS, and now it's
Yeah,
also a feature in Freeform. That's the first thing I do when there's a new Mac OS beta every summer.
check to see if the stickies app still
Yeah.
works.
I don't use Stickies on my Mac,
Yeah,
but if they ever get rid of it, it's the most 512 pixels blog post that's ever been. And so I'm just every year I check.
I don't know. You put one up a few weeks ago about the Apple Jonathan,
Yeah,
and that one really landed with me. You know, okay, can I go off topic for just a second?
please.
Component PCs used to really be the dream. Like the very first one that I recall, I was thinking about this when I read your post, was the Timex Sinclair, which was a terrible computer. But there was the memory block, there was the printer block, there was all these things, and you're supposed to be able to plug them together. And that was like the dream for us back then because everything was so expensive. They're like, well, I could just buy it, and then I could just buy the plug-on memory or the plug-on drive. You could slowly build it over time. I don't think it ever worked. I don't think there was ever a good implementation of a component-based computer. But if you lived back then, I remember why it was a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
then ultimately, that's what led to the build your own PC market. That was the ultimate kind of realization of components.
The Jonathan, man, it was a real idea someone had.
It made total sense back then. I kind of wish they shipped it.
Yeah, it would have been super cool, but they didn't get it close. Apparently, just a concept, but still a fun thing to get into. It's not every day that I get to like crack open my Apple history books and like quote actual books because there's nothing on the internet about that computer. So now there is.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. Protect yourself, your family, and your global workforce with simple security, easy secret sharing, and actionable insight reports. Go to onepassword.com/MPU for 20% off. Quite often, Stephen and I talk about using 1Password for our family accounts because that's how we use it. But did you know you can use 1Password to protect your company as well? With 1Password, you can take the guesswork out of password management, shadow IT infrastructure, and secret sharing so you can keep your people safe and your business moving. 1Password for companies lets you monitor usage for your employees and streamline adoption. You can also manage access and share credentials so people get exactly what they need and no more. You can monitor the password health, potential data breaches, and user access from a unified dashboard so you can take immediate action. And you can pave the path to productivity, making sure everything is easy to use, people understand how it works. You can set up business password vaults to streamline credential management and let help teams share logins securely. It really is a complete solution for your company. We've heard from a bunch of Mac Power Users listeners that are using 1Password for companies and they're very happy with it. And it checks all the boxes for compliance, data encryption at rest and in transit, audit security logs, customizable access and control policies, SOC Type 2 compliant, GDPR, CCPA. They got it all covered. But I think the best thing about it is that it's just easy to use, so your employees will actually use it. I remember once I was leaving a deposition and opposing counsel's secretary had her system password on a sticky note on her computer. And I told him in his office, hey, did you know that the password for your network is XYZ? And he flipped out. I'm like, no, it's on your secretary's desk. You should tell her not to do that and change it. I don't think he ever appreciated that I was trying to help him out. But don't be like that. Use 1Password for your company and securely protect you and your data. To learn more, go to onepassword.com/MPU. Once again, that is onepassword.com/MPU to get that 20% off. Check it out and let them know you heard about it here on the Mac Power Users. Okay, so this thing with the Vision Pro, while it may not exist for the purpose because of the Vision Pro, it certainly sings on the Vision Pro. I was in this outline the other day, and my usual trick for Vision Pro with Freeform. Okay, listener, just close your eyes unless you're driving, and come along with me on this journey. All right, so I've got this studio I built, and on the south facing wall there are no windows. So I have a wall that is, I think, 9 feet tall and something like 14 feet long. So I've got this massive wall in here with nothing on it but these wood things that I put on. So what I do, and then I've got a rolling table that I can stand behind.
Mm-hmm.
So I put a freeform board up the size of the wall. So it's like 9 by 14 feet. And then I pull the table out about 4 feet away from it. And then I put my iPad on the table. And so I've got the iPad and page open to the exact same freeform document as the one that's on the wall. And the pass-through video on Vision Pro is good, just good enough that it works. So if I want to write something on the wall, I do it on the iPad.
Okay.
But then I can walk around and look at it on the wall size. Now, ideally, it'd be better if I could like have an Apple Pencil and write on the wall, right?
Which is rumored. I don't know if you saw this. There's a rumor going around that the Apple Pencil would be supported in visionOS 2 for apps like Freeform and photo editors, which is super interesting.
I have no idea how you would do that. How would you do that? Because what are you going to push it against?
It seems like it would be on a desk or a flat surface, and then the drawing would appear somehow in the open app. I agree with you. It's weird, but if you're a user like you are, where you're handwriting a lot in a free form, it could be really interesting. I mean, because
I'd love to see it, but yeah. I mean, I don't know how. I don't know what they're talking about. But ideally, I mean, the idea of these. I mean, there's science behind this that. If we do use spatial awareness, the reason why I love the big 3M pads is I would look at that and it would just be on my desk and I'd be constantly updating as I'm thinking through a problem. And at the end, I'd usually have a solution on this big piece of paper. And I've been getting the same results using a big freeform document, but it's not as, in some ways it's worse because the 3 foot by 5 foot, or I'm sorry, it was like 2 by 3, 2 feet by 3 foot thing on my desk was bigger than my screen. So that's kind of nice. Like you can kind of take it all in. Even on my big giant monitor, it's not as big and giant. But with the visionOS, I take it to the next level because it gets so much bigger. But I do think there's something to writing physically on the document itself that you don't get with the Vision Pro. And but having the iPad, honestly, to me, solves the problem because it does work good enough on the iPad. And there's 2 ways I use those documents. One is writing things down on it, but the other thing is where I just look at it, and I'll look at it for a long time without writing anything down. I'm just looking at it to try and figure my way out of a jigsaw puzzle. And having to be able to look at it and walk around it, I love that. I think this is like an ideal implementation. It's one of my kind of key Vision Pro workflows. I mean, we hear from listeners that say, yeah, I bought the Vision Pro. It's kind of a fun experiment, but I'm not sure what to do with it. Well, this is one thing I absolutely do with it all the time is I solve big problems with a board the size of my wall in here. And I love it for that. So that's kind of the big overview of what I'm doing. But the trick is having an attached iPad and the rock solid sync that Freeform has, where I can write something on the iPad, and by the time I find it on the wall, it's already updated.
And if you extend that through SharePlay, you can collaborate with somebody who is remote. So Mike
Yeah.
Hurley and I were just doing this earlier today, actually. Had a freeform board. He's in London. I'm here. We're in our Vision Pros, and we can both have it really big in our offices, and we can both edit it. And again, the sync is so fast; it's effectively real time, and moving things around and typing and adding photos and imagery. It's really great in the Vision Pro, and I I think we're in agreement that the downside is the text entry. Like if you're doing a lot of typing in a freeform board, it's one thing, but handwriting you are going to need an iPad or something else there. But the sync is so good, it's kind of like a magic trick that you could use two devices at once, and that's not true with a lot of the software we talk about on this show. Freeform is kind of in a league on its own, I think, when it comes to that, where you're using an iPad as an input device for something you're seeing through the Vision Pro, and then, like you said, you're walking around, you're viewing it, you're probably doing stuff with it in Vision OS, and then going back to the iPad, and it all kind of works fluidly. That's pretty cool, and that's sort of the promise Apple makes about its ecosystem, that you can move in between these devices based on what you're doing at the moment and what your workflow needs where you are. And I think Freeform can meet those needs, in particular in Vision OS.
Yeah. And another workflow for visionOS, if you don't want to, get the Apple Pencil out, is you can be standing at a desk or sitting in a chair with Vision Pro on and a keyboard in your lap or in front of you. And it gets even easier at that point. I mean, truly, with a trackpad and a keyboard, you can be adding stuff to it. Like, I don't know, with the one you're sharing with Mike, are you guys handwriting or just using keyboard?
Just keyboard, because I think we were both in our headsets.
Yeah. Well, I get it, man. I think there's something to this, and I don't know. I'm sounding too much like a cheerleader, but this workflow with the Vision Pro, it's probably still not enough of a justification to go buy a Vision Pro. But if you're making a list to convince your significant other how important it is to you, you have my permission to add this one. But I've got all sorts of little and big problems I'm working on that have a Vision Pro board attached to them, and it's basically replaced the big sticky pad. I looked at other software solutions for this over the years. If you look at the Mac Sparky archive, I have written about infinite canvas apps for a while, and I really have felt strongly that I wanted a good one. And there's a bunch of them out there. There's some web-based ones. There's some iPad ones, but this is the one for me because of the fact that it works on all my platforms and it syncs flawlessly. And I use the sync primarily with myself. Like, I don't share a lot of my freeform boards. These are generally for me to think about things. But even just that sharing between my own devices is so efficient. Like, there's a couple good iPad apps that do stuff like this. They even have more tools than the Apple one does, but they're not tools that I really need, and they don't have the sync nailed down the way Apple does. So this one just kind of landed for me once they got everything sorted out.
Yeah. And I think it benefits from Apple's other work. Like if you're using it on an iPhone or an iPad, this or even Vision Pro, the sketch tools are the same, right? You get the same kind of set of tools with the pens and the highlighter and the eraser, and the color picker is the same. And
Yeah.
I think the Vision OS version benefits from all of that. That even though it's like massive on your wall, and yeah, you can't do direct handwriting, you're kind of doing it through another device. The tools are all familiar, but also contextualized to where you are, right? Like if you're on a Mac, you're going to be typing, right? But if you're on the phone or iPad or something else, then you have those drawing tools to either use with your finger or the Apple Pencil. And the Vision OS version, I think, just slots into that really nicely.
Yeah. Another like use for it. Well, I guess I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it does have a lot of flowchart usage as well. The graphic images can easily be turned into flowcharts, which is another thing you could do without a pencil at all if you wanted. And if you're working on a team, like one of the ones I shared with you was an early version of a thing where I was trying to flowchart out all my workflows, like what steps do a blog post go through, what steps do a newsletter go through, and like trying to figure out each step. Is this something that I need to do, or is this something I could get help with? And it was just kind of a visual thing I was going through, but I flowcharted the whole thing. And I used to spend money on very fancy flowchart software, and I feel like this is kind of good enough for me to do a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I've tried like mind mapping, and MindNode still has my heart when it comes to mind mapping because the connection tools are so much better than Freeform. But but for just general flowchart work, I think this is fine.
Yeah, I think so too. I really think those apps are kind of in different categories
Yeah.
a little bit. You're not driving Freeform with just your keyboard very often, where
Yeah.
MindNode and others, like MindNode, you can kind of just like blast through something pretty quickly and not have to touch the mouse, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. But my Freeform boards tend to use the Apple Pencil a lot. And I don't think that's necessarily true for everyone. I think a lot of people use Freeform without ever touching an Apple Pencil. And that's kind of one of the nice things about it is you get to do it however you want.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about the connectors and sort of that workflow? Because that's something that I have used quite a bit in doing. Like I've got one like my network topology at home, or like what's plugged into where at my desk. And you could draw lines in between things sort of manually, but there's also this idea of connectors in Freeform and kind of building flowcharts.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny that we decided to share some boards with each other. And without discussing it, we both shared network diagrams that we had made in Freeform. Like, of course, both of us decided to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's helpful to know where things are plugged in. That's all I'm saying,
Yeah, it helps. It helps. And it cost me money because I bought something you had in yours that I had. But yeah, so like network diagrams are great. So you can drag in graphic images, you can put text boxes, but the connectors allow you to connect basically any object in Freeform. And once you turn it on, you just drag the arrow over. You can change the properties of the connector. So if you want it to be lines or dots or just arrows or whatever you want at the end of these connectors, you can change that. And they're magnetic attachments, which means when you move the object, the connector stays attached and magnetically follows it wherever you put it. And that's what we need for most of this stuff.
The other nice thing about the connector feature is it's also a handy way to make sure your stuff is aligned, which if you're doing a diagram, just like a little extra detail that makes it look nice.
Yeah.
Where you can, once you drag something over, if you see that, this isn't actually horizontal the way I want it to be, then you can move the object down and it all snaps to grid, which you may be familiar with from iWork apps. Like if you're in Keynote, I'm dragging this and I want to make sure it's aligned with that over there. A lot of apps make that difficult. I think Apple's been pretty good at making it simple to make sure those things are sort of aligned. And that's a nice feature of the connectors. I find it a little weird. I think I understand it, but it is its own mode where you're sort of toggling in and out of connector mode, and I guess they want to make it easy to do everything manually if that's what you want to do. And it's not that big of a deal. You swap into the mode, but it is something if you haven't come across. It's a little button in the bottom right hand corner, like on the Mac and iPad. And if you toggle it, it's show connectors for objects or hide connectors for objects. And you can also hide or show the dot grid if that's not your jam as well. But I love this. It's a great way to make flowcharts. It's a great way to make diagrams and to make them look really good. You can do something in this. You can export it as a PDF, and it's gonna look awesome.
Yeah, I mean, historically, I would talk on this show about how I use Keynote for non-presentation work and diagramming. Keynote was great for it because it had kind of the same tool set, but this is a better version of it, frankly. You can put it together. It really is meant to build these sheets. So, go for that.
Yeah, it's a very useful feature. And I think it speaks to how Apple kind of knew some people would want to use this to make those sorts of things. So you can be all handwritten, kind of free flowing type thing, or if you want something really kind of nice and tidy, you can do that too, all within the same application. And I think that's a challenge, but I think that they've definitely met.
Just a couple, but we did talk about, we spent a lot of time the first time we covered this, going through all the bugs. And this time we don't have that many, but I did find a couple. And one of them is and I've seen this for a while now, but shame on me, I haven't submitted it. The text justification doesn't always work as intended to me. Like sometimes like lines get accepted, when you want left, right, or center. I have some inconsistency with that. And I found the best way to deal with it is to select the entire section and then it resets the justification. But when I try to do individual lines, it sometimes gives me problems. And it's not even all the time, but I do see that. The other one for me is, and I guess I'll call this a bug. They have a pen that allows you to enter text by, writing down. And I think if you handwrite, it's probably fine. But because I print, it doesn't do a very good job. I feel like the auto text entry pen has never worked for me. And this may just be my handwriting and the way I write. But I feel like in the age of AI, that should work for everybody. And it doesn't work for me. Like, it just like sometimes I don't know. It seems like it has trouble understanding that I'm writing multiple words. So it'll like put each word as a separate object, which is no fun to go back and try and sort that out. And
yeah.
It's just the auto text pen to me feels like it's still a beta.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think people also have issues with it, with similar technology like in Apple Notes, and maybe this is something that will improve as AI becomes more baked into these tools. But I think in an app like Freeform, that's got to be better because I think a lot of people are going to use it exactly in that way. They want to handwrite and they want to be able to find that text later. And that's gotta be really good, right? It's a tale as old as time, or at least as old as the Newton. We're not saying it's easy, but I think it should be better. This episode of MPU is brought to you by NetSuite. Quick math. The less your business spends on operations, multiple systems, and delivering your product or service, the more margin you have, and the more money you get to keep. But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more now. So reduce the cost of headaches. Smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you can reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required, and it's accessed from anywhere. So you cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems because you've got one unified business management suite. You improve efficiency by bringing all your major businesses' processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move, so do the math and see how you'll profit from NetSuite. I know as a small business owner how important it is to boost business performance, and this is a great way to do it. So between now and April 15th, NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind flexible financing program. Head to netsuite.com/MPU. That's NETSUITE. netsuite.com/MPU. Our thanks to NetSuite for the support of the show.
All right, Stephen, I've been wanting to know, what are you doing with Freeform? I've already let the cat out of the bag a little bit for myself, but what are you doing?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, network topography, desk topography, that sort of thing, just technical information that is best laid out this way. But a Freeform document I've been chipping away on over the last couple of months is sort of my wife and I's like financial life, like our sort of cash flow and that sort of thing. I've got online tools to help with that, but I kind of just wanted to sit down and be like, okay, I get paid and I, like you, like, we're independent, but we really have multiple jobs, right? Like, I've got
Yeah.
512 and Relay and Underscore and like my shows and membership. I do all these different things. And I wanted to get my hands around kind of where does all that go, what comes in, what comes out. And I was really struggling with how to see it all, right? Like, again, I have financial software and that's really useful. But then I realized, like, oh, Freeform would be perfect for this, like a big, broad overview. And visually, it's the simplest board you've ever seen. It's a bunch of text boxes with connectors, but it was so useful to not only have, like, okay, get my understanding down on paper, but then we met with our financial advisor and like I sent him a PDF. I was like, this is my understanding of how all this works. Like, are we on the same page with how things work, and being able to show Mary. And again, it's a very simple board, but it was so useful in understanding the flow of things, and really different. I mean, most of mine, if I'm looking in my library right now, like most of them are sort of like how my network's put together, how my mom's network is put together at her house, because there's some oddities there. But the financial one is when it really clicked for me of like, oh, this is actually useful in other contexts than just pure documentation.
Yeah, that's a good use.
I will not be sharing that one in the show notes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I get it. I get it. But that kind of describes my favorite use of it too. It's just like take a problem, that you're dealing with, like if you're working on a dissertation or if you're trying to figure out your financial well-being or make a decision about your career, and just like start writing down ideas about it. And the beauty of this, the advantage of this over my big sticky pad is I can move things around. And I find that to be really advantageous because sometimes as I rethink it, things belong in different spaces. And I didn't even mention in my tips section, but the selection tool is really versatile. I mean, you can circle things, you can select things. The selection pencil, if you're getting familiar with this app, is something you need to kind of play with to figure it out because everything is movable that way and big blocks can be movable. My favorite way is to write in it with a pencil. So I'm always taking things I've written and moving them around and just kind of allow me to spatially figure it out. And this goes back to kind of the idea I had of cooking ideas we talked about on Mac Power Users like 10 years ago. But the thought is you take a problem and rather than say I'm going to take 4 hours and figure out this problem, you just take a problem and you start a board on it, and then you spend 10 minutes on it, and then you come back in a day or two and you spend another 10 minutes on it. And I really feel like the subconscious brain does a lot of the heavy lifting for you if you give yourself enough space. So any big problem I'm working on, I'll start with a board, and unfortunately in a point in my life where usually there's not a huge deadline on a lot of this stuff, so I can take as much time as it takes to solve the problem. But even when there are deadlines, I just start early enough that I can use a board to solve the problem. So I've made keynotes, I've written legal briefs, I've written the productivity field guide. Started off as just a freeform board with the word productivity field guide in the middle, and I started writing things down and what's important to me and organizing. And all of it eventually ends up somewhere else, but this just gives me a place to kind of like sort it out. And the nearly infinite canvas gives me the safety when I start there that I know wherever my brain goes with this, I'm going to have enough room to make it work. And now I can stick it up on my wall and really look at it and think about it.
Yeah.
And so idea development or project development, I think this is a really useful tool. Interestingly, I don't share them much.
I don't either. I mean, like I said, I've got that share one with Mike that we were just kind of playing around with some visual stuff in,
Yeah.
and I've got the ones that I've shared with you for our couple of episodes.
Yeah.
But for me, the syncing is almost more important than the sharing. Having it on my
Yeah.
iPad, having it on my phone, having it on the Vision Pro, like that is really useful. It's the same reason I like things like notes, right? Like I can have all this information with me all the time. And especially if you're using this for documentation, which I think is a really strong use case. Then when you're trying to troubleshoot something or figure something out, like you can just pull your phone out or your iPad out. You don't have to have your Mac with you. You don't have to have, some big bulky device. And a lot of apps like this in the past were, desktop apps, and it
Yeah.
was impossible or really hard to have a good version of this on mobile. And again, like going back to one of the things we like about this, it's great on the iPhone and iPad. Really good. And so having the portability there is really nice.
Yeah. And the sync location or spatial awareness is so much better now. Everything stays where it was put. So, but I want to like just refine the idea a bit. So the idea of idea development for me a lot of times is I'll have like a kind of a freeform thing where I've got lines connecting thing, kind of the, what's that what they call with the red string where you've got the crazy man who's got like a wall in
Yeah.
his closet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of look like that when I'm developing an idea, but I also use the left side of it as like kind of just thoughts on the thing that I haven't figured out where they fit yet. So I kind of have a built-in architecture to it in my head, right? Usually on the left side, I've got like unprocessed ideas. Kind of in the center, I've got the string crazy man bit. And then if I get to a point where I refine it more, I'll start refining it in diagrams and things that are above the strings. And the thing is, this canvas just expands to your need. Basically, it, like I said, it does reach a limit where it won't work anymore. And so sometimes I'll make a separate board where I've got kind of the refined, okay, this is what my thought is now. This is what it's going to be. But just as often, I won't do that. Instead, that'll turn into, an outline, a proper outline, or it'll turn into a document or a keynote or whatever. But this thing was just kind of the infant stage. But I also am willing to sometimes make proper diagrams, like we were sharing our network diagrams. I felt like this was the right app for that.
Yeah, I would love to hear from people who are really using this more collaboratively than we are.
Yeah.
Because I do think that's a big use case. And I think it being free and built in to the OS effectively, it sets it
Yeah.
apart from some other apps, right? That maybe they're online, or maybe, you got to have everyone's got to have a serial number or something. It being built in is a strong point. And so maybe in the forum, if people are doing that, I'd love to know how that's working for you.
Yeah. Well, it's like this show was on my list of things I was working on, and I had my regular call with JF, who kind of is my helper, and he's like, "Do you even use Freeform?" I'm like, "Yeah, I use it all the time. You just don't know about it because I don't share anything." And I think that is something I should think about. But honestly, it allows me to work through thoughts and ideas, and that's how I use it. And I love using it with Vision Pro. I feel like that is really one of my favorite workflows on that device. One trick though is you put the battery cable down your shirt, put the battery in your pocket, because when you're walking around, you do not want to snag that cable on
No.
something. Not that it's ever happened to me.
Not that it's ever, yeah. Like Daisy's home, she hears a crash, like, oh, he must be working on ideas in his office. He's fine.
Yeah.
What about areas of improvement? What are some things that you would like to see in this app? I will say, looking at our Freeform board, your first one or your second one is one that I totally agree with about the highlight. But what are some things that you'd like to see changed?
Yeah. The first one is GoodNotes style handwriting. GoodNotes has this thing where it gives you a big sheet where you can handwrite like kind of on a larger scale, and it automatically inserts it at the selected point in the document and smaller, and it auto scrolls. So as you get to the end, it just gives you more space to keep writing. I think it's an excellent interface. Maybe there's an IP thing involved. I don't know, but I would love to have pen text entry like that. Now, the system that they do use is you can just zoom in really tight and do that, but when you get to the end of the line, then you've got to refocus the screen, and it's just kind of a pain. I would like to see them do something like what GoodNotes did with handwriting import. And the other thing we haven't mentioned during the show is color selection is okay. So when you have the pen selector, there's some default colors. They're all kind of dark uh, primary colors that they've picked as the default colors. And then there's a tool you can click on to select additional colors. But I use highlighting all the time, and I want very subtle colors for the highlighting. I like
Yes.
subtle highlighting. I don't like bright. And you have to go in and create them. And then the way it's set up, you have to scroll through them. You can't show them by default. And I want it to be easier to use subtle highlights, and just I want more user control over the highlights. I spent like 30 minutes trying to figure out if I could change the defaults, and ultimately I gave up, and I don't think you can. Somebody in the forums may say, "Oh yeah, you just do X, Y, and Z," but if there is a way to do it, it's not obvious to me, and that's something we need.
I totally agree. I like that it's the system picker in terms of color, but I do find it a bit frustrating, and I find the stock sort of default colors just not what I want. I wish, and this is like a bigger wish, just Freeform. I wish this in iWork and others. You can, like you said, you can save your own colors to the color palette thing. That's way better on the Mac than anything else. So on the Mac, it just kind of gets added to the bottom of the picker.
Yeah, you don't have to go through Windows to get there. Yeah,
Yeah. So I would really like them, again, system wide, because they're using the system implementation of this, to set your own color palette. And I even wouldn't mind it for that to be like per board, or having multiple palettes I could choose from. So if I'm
yeah,
doing a collaborative environment, maybe I need to use my corporate colors, right? If you work at a big company, companies love their own Pantones, right? Like FedEx
yeah.
has their purple and their orange and their blue or whatever. That sort of thing is important in a lot of contexts. And it would be great to be able to save presets of colors, just save that palette and then be able to quickly implement it, as opposed to having to rebuild it every time.
Yeah, and it's like, to add insult to injury, in the selection panel where you can add your own, the first 5 slots are taken with the primary colors already available. So it's like
Yeah.
you, it's like, okay, well, we're going to take half of the slots for colors you could have already picked on the prior screen.
Yeah. I don't know what happened there. It's very,
Yeah,
it's very strange to me. Uh,
yeah,
but yes, I totally agree. That would be very nice to have that overhauled.
yeah. But these are small things. I mean, we kind of lit this app up the last time we talked about it, and justifiably, because it had a bunch of problems. But I really find it quite useful. And if you're somebody who's a visual thinker, you know, having a big thing you can write on to kind of think about ideas is really useful. And even though there's a disadvantage to going digital over analog for this, but the advantages so far outweigh it. The ability to move text, the ability to apply different colors, the ability to drop existing imagery and do proper diagramming, and the fact that it's in your pocket with you. There's just really no contest for me. You could not convince me to go back to the system I used to use with the big sheets of paper.
Yeah. I think the other thing, for me, in terms of wish list, and again, this is a bit broader than Freeform, but I would like it to be really easy to manage both the emoji and SF symbols in
Yeah,
Freeform. SF symbols in particular, it's this huge library of glyphs that Apple has, and they don't expose them to the end user very often. And when they do, it's often a limited subset, or kind of janky the way that they do it. And I think I should have the ability to use any of those I want. I think particularly in something like Freeform, as a way to annotate different sections, even if it's just visual flair, with an emoji, with a SS symbol, I think can make a board much more visually, not only visually pleasing, but also easier to sort of make glanceable, right? Easier to parse. And I think that a tool like this that is inherently visual, no matter if you're using text or handwriting or images, like this is a visual tool, bringing those elements in that are already in the system, they're just right
yeah.
there. Bringing them in, making them easy to manage, easy to use, I think would be a stellar update.
Well, and also, like, if you look at, like, I shared with you my computer I/O
Yeah,
board. If you look at it on your Mac, I put SF symbols in there, and they look great.
they do.
It's like, okay, camera goes to this port, drive goes to that port, microphone goes to that port. But then you open it up on the iPad or the iPhone, and they're just big question marks because SF symbols aren't a native font on iPad and iPhone.
It's goofy.
I need to figure that's on my research list. Is there a way to like hack that? Can I put the SF symbols in here some way?
Yeah, I know. I know on the Mac there's the SF symbols app. You can copy them out as images, but then they're not text anymore because like SF symbols kind of work like text in places. It's a very strange system. I think all of that could be cleaned up. There's a reason I didn't use them in my computer layout. In fact, I went and got images of like a MacBook Pro and a studio display and a CalDigit and stuff to avoid that. But I think it would make for a really compelling tool set within Freeform.
Yeah.
Make it happen, Apple.
Yeah. I mean, these are small refinements, but I mean, the theme here is go try Freeform. It's really good now.
It is. Yeah. Look, compared to the bugs we talked about last time, where text would literally move across the screen without you touching it, this is pretty great.
Yeah, I mean that they fixed it was unusable that way.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's more than just usable now. It's actually useful, if that makes sense.
It totally is. And I suspect it will, like I said, it will continue to get better. It will continue to improve. And I think as time goes on, I think in particular, I'm most interested in what Apple does with this on visionOS. Having that ability to make it really big, to use it, life size. Like, how do you get the text in? I think all that's really interesting, and I suspect that Apple has more ideas around how to make it really shine on the Vision Pro. I mean, even today there was a press statement that some of us got about spatial personas. So basically, if you're on a FaceTime call, your persona can now come out of the box and like be next to somebody. It's pretty cool. But in the example photos they sent, it was a huge freeform board with like, I think it was like Mars rover stuff, the content on the board. But then you had like you as the user and a couple of your friends on FaceTime, or coworkers, I should say, probably on FaceTime with their spatial personas. And like Freeform was like the heart of their collaborative working. I think Apple really believes in that idea. And I think they should. And that's where I'm most curious about how they can push this forward. Like, yeah, give us these extra features, continue to squash the bugs. But how does this become a really unique, powerful tool for working in spatial computing? Out of all of Apple's software, their entire library, this I think is the most interesting one when it comes to sort of that next step.
Totally agree. What we said earlier, I want to put an exclamation point there. If you're using Freeform for interesting things, go to the forums at talk.macpowerusers.com. Go ahead and sign up. It's free. We'd love to have you join us and let us know what you're doing with Freeform. I'm looking, I say that selfishly because I want to use it even more and I want to hear your ideas, but go let us know. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us at relay.fm/MPU. I want to thank our sponsors today, 1Password and NetSuite. If you'd like to check out the More Power Users extended version, ad-free with the extra content, go over to relay.fm/MPU. You can sign up right there. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.